Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Miss Johnny says, I'm Dr. Nevada Winrow, founder of Black Girls Die Foundation. I just wanted to start off to have everyone, we'll be using a round robin format as we um, approach several questions that we have for the panel to kind of keep things flowing. And I guess I'll start with Amy. Can you tell us about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Wang. As we mentioned, I am creative director and managing partner at OpenBox, which is a research and design firm based in Brooklyn, New York. We use human-centered design layered in with equity-centered design methods to do our work. And just to put it, I think, in plain terms, I started out in the design field. Normally you start and you think about what you're going to build. What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? In the design thinking / human-centered design process, we think about, well, what do people want? And so to do that work, we need to do the research beforehand and to go out into the field and go visit people at home and really involve the people who are going to be, the users or, the communities who are going to be the people who actually live with the things we design in the end. So short description of what I do. The way STEM comes into this, I think just by chance, I studied biology actually as part of my undergraduate degree. I focused on microbiology and infectious diseases. My thesis project was on the genetics of Giardia. So this is where I come in.
Okay. John Pierre. Uh-oh, can you hear me? John Pierre?
I had missed it. That happens at least once a week. So Zoom Live. Thanks so much, Dr. Winrow, and I'm so happy that I can be on the panel today and talk with such esteemed company. So I am a PhD in computer science, computer vision. I'm very excited to be at this moment in technology and machine learning, and I started a computer vision company a couple of years ago called the Trash App. Which is kind of a small automatic video app. So we used AI to help you make kind of TikTok style videos. And it was just fantastic fun. It's a silly app, but great to work on. And it was wonderful in that process to be introduced to things like what you work on, Amy, user research, understanding how people want to tell stories in the world and new media that people want to be telling these stories with. To really engage with a broad audience that might be on a computer, might be on a phone, might be God knows where, trying to absorb the content that you want to communicate. And so that was a really interesting couple of years. And I got to know a little bit the startup community in Brooklyn, which I would recommend to everyone. It's a great place to live and a great place to start a company. And then my company got bought. Yay! By this other photo editing company called VSCO, VSCO, which I recommend everyone to download. And if you'd like a trial membership, hit me up. And so that's we are building video editing at this platform called VSCO.
Okay. Well, you see, we have two very distinguished guests amongst us. I will start with our first question. How would you say you discover your voice and having a unique perspective? This is a great question, John Vieve. Can you guys talk about discovering your voice and providing a unique perspective, particularly as it relates to storytelling and integrating that storytelling to focus on STEM? Does that make sense? For how we can use storytelling and our unique voices and the process of going about even discovering your voice as you went through your journey.
Well, if you don't mind me jumping in, and then
sure.
So I think that it's a really interesting and important time to be communicating about STEM. That so many STEM topics, especially in the last year, they're so a part of our everyday life. I think that even a couple of years ago, really sophisticated STEM topics, things, virology, immunology, machine learning. These things seemed very far away from everyone's daily life. And that I, as a graduate student, as someone who is interested in STEM, I have seen so many people's careers really take off because they were able to say, this is the specific problem that I'm the most interested in. This is like who I am, and kind of, you know, in the Dolly Parton sort of way, you know, who are you? And then dress that way, like lean into exactly who you are. That I think that also asking that question, not just like who my identity is or who I see myself as, but what problems do I see myself working on and what problems do I think are the most important? And then writing about those things, I think couldn't be, you know, more important. And I have had a little bit of success with it. A couple years ago, many scientists and really like aspiring scientists get a tremendous amount of success out of just writing what their own thoughts are. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't really have to exactly know how everything works. If you're discovering a new topic in STEM, don't worry that you don't know how it works. That is actually not important. Your process of discovering that thing in STEM and writing about it, or you know, vlogging about it, video, photography, and sharing that with other people, that's so you know, crucially important, and will get you a lot of response. And that is also maybe how you can, you know, discover a community that you'd like to build your career with.
Okay. How about you, Amy, and discovering your voice and the process of, you know, storytelling, and how you can see that integrating with STEM at this juncture?
Sure, yeah. In thinking about my own voice, I think a lot about role models. And, you know, my parents were all immigrants, and their role modeling for me was thinking about, you know, security and stability. And so they worked hard, and they fed everything they had, all the free time, all the resources they had, into keeping the family stable and supporting the family. So it took me a really long time to think about what other models there could be, especially in thinking about my own story. In terms of my career, I remember being, you know, a little girl on my dad's lap, and he would say, "You're going to study very hard, you're going to go to Harvard, and you're going to become a doctor." And that was the story that was told for me. And because I didn't see many other role models, you know, as a young girl, I didn't really know about other possibilities. It took me a very long time to discover for myself that, in fact, you know, as much as I appreciate STEM and glad I went through the experience and the rigor of that, to figure out that actually the way I like to work, the way I like to interact with people, the way I like to be in the way I think is through the creative fields. And so it took me a really long, winding path to push back actually against the role models I had lived with all of my life. And my mom at one point said, like, "I'm so ashamed, you know, and this is something you just have to choose. You choose it because you feel that that's your story." And to set myself on my own path to become a designer, and that's where I am now.
Okay, that's a good transition into the next question about how to find an audience. So how did you ladies find a supportive audience that helped to grow your ideas? Mentorship and so forth. How did you guys find your support?
You know, Amy, your experience of not really having the role models that would directly get you into the place that you are now, where you've found something that you're passionate about, you found a job that brings you joy, hopefully, that finding role models is often like a really difficult thing. And finding an audience like to support you. Sometimes your role models, at least for me, I think that a lot of times some of my best role models weren't people who had already accomplished everything. It was more finding people who I could talk to. And so my goal often when I'm trying to do tech writing, when I'm trying to, because most of my like experience of storytelling is really like teaching and talking about computer science and talking about machine learning, and that I try to find peers and people that I would like enjoy talking to. And literally where that is often on Twitter. the Twitter and other social media places can be kind of toxic. But I've just tried very hard to find like where yeah, where are the people who are going to be my friends that I would like, I'd like to live like them. I'd like to have their experience. They don't always have to be, you know, so much more far along in their career or advanced. And then finding those people that you can like ask them to read something that you did, that you can ask for their feedback on something. And even it's, I think sometimes even better if you can ask those people those things in a social media place, because that is what has led me to grow an even larger audience. That if I could ask that, having that conversation, then I could grow an audience that way. And that's something that like really excites me about social media in general, as a way to like discover an audience that's supportive.
How about you, Amy?
Yeah, I think there's something very simple in the fact that it's not, a role model always. It's peers, it's people you work with. And I think what unifies me and the people I work with is often our shared values of the mission we're trying to accomplish. And so at OpenBox, and I think in the field in general for human-centered design, it's the idea of who, and this is actually very topical, who gets to tell their stories. Because in terms of, what stories exist, and even thinking about, for me, I think a lot about, what are stories that we don't even realize are stories. Science is presented often as fact, and that there's deviation from facts. But really, what gets told is actually still an evolving story. The story of COVID and what we know about it is a story. And so in our work, we think very intentionally about who to bring into the story, whose voices have not been included in any of the stories. For our clients, it's thinking through, who the outcomes might impact and influence. And so can we make sure to reach out in different ways from how it's been in the past to reach underserved communities or communities that are not at the center, and to center those voices and stories that actually, would otherwise not get told.
Okay. Now, one thing that I'm working with our girls, and it is challenging because it's not my wheelhouse. Like I can kind of tell the story, but as you guys are the professionals, there is a method, a systematic method of going about storytelling, which I'm trying to teach myself and teach our young ladies, the BGD scholars, with being able to capture and tell their journey, and having it be logically sequenced. It's very interesting. How would you recommend, or how do you use storytelling how could you use storytelling with STEM topics? And I'm definitely taking notes with this because I'm trying to figure this out for my own young ladies in my program, how to go about that. Does that question make sense to you guys? Okay. Yeah. So just how would you approach it?
Yeah. So I can give you like how I've done it and how a couple of ways that I think are really successful. So something, and this is like my own bias, but I think that images are really important in STEM, in kind of internet communication. That I think that ways that I have put a narrative together when I'm trying to communicate an experiment that I've worked on, a prototype that I've done, some kind of like learning experience. I'm learning to use a new technology and I want to write about that. What I've done is I start out with the pictures. So I think I've done the process, and often this is a little bit tricky, but often writing these things, it's very intimidating to do it all at once. So doing it as you go is great, and I would absolutely recommend that. That you're collecting some sort of like, I'm going to call it tangible, but it's more like data. I know that's literally a picture, but a picture of your notebook. Like if your diving scholars are keeping like a dive notebook, taking a picture of the thing that they just wrote, or taking pictures of their equipment, that they can be giving like a very different perspective. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but the way that I usually have some project, I'm trying to take as many and write. So I book where videos, graphs, maps that have captions. And then when I'm ready to kind of like turn it into a story, I go back through and I organize those images into an outline. And then I spend a while thinking about a title, thinking about something that's like a compelling, like, you know, sentence or synopsis. A title is something I try to spend a lot of time on. And then I have a title, and then the rest of it ends up sort of falling into place. Once you have a title and you have an outline with figures that are compelling and interesting to look at, and those figures maybe even have a little bit of captions. When I have written blogs and papers and business presentations and pitches, that then everything else just fell right into place after I had all of that. Writing is very important, and going back several times to polish the writing and get other people's impact, that's important. But once I'm in that place where I have a title and an outline of images or videos, that everything else is much easier and downhill from there.
Okay, I'm definitely taking notes. So what say you, Amy? What's your process? What's your recommendations? How do we go about doing it?
Sure, yeah. So because my job is helping others tell their stories, I'm going to share a couple of ways that is helpful. I think the first thing is to think about storytelling and asking questions, which is a large part of what I do, as kind of similar to looking at an eclipse, where you don't want to look at the sun directly. And so there's some really deep topics that we're often trying to learn from people, you know, about their aspirations and their deepest fears or their concerns and anxieties, or even just, you know, their lived experiences in some ways that can be hard to summarize with a really big, broad, direct question that's meant to cover everything. So it's like looking at the sun. You do it through your special, protective glasses. In the same way, there are ways to ask questions indirectly. So, for example, and I think I'll go a little bit more into depth tomorrow in my breakout session about this, but I did a project once where we were trying to understand people's attitudes and feelings about this new emerging disease that is not COVID, but was Zika. This is in 2016. And that was 2016 in May in Puerto Rico, and trying to understand what people knew, didn't know who they trusted for this information. It's still kind of like where we are today in early stages of COVID, where there's a lot of information, misinformation, and so there's a lot of anxiety around that. And so one activity that me and my team did was to, so this is part of our very scrappy research work where you do things on the fly, you make things up as you go. We took the hotel mouthwash, a travel size Listerine bottle, wrapped it in a blank piece of paper, and presented it to a group of young men that we were doing research with, because one of the things about Zika is it affects pregnant women, but guess what? Men are part of the population who needs to know about Zika as contributors to pregnancy. We said, okay, imagine this is a magic potion that's going to cure Zika. First of all, what would you call it? And where would you expect to buy it? And if it's on TV as an ad in a commercial, who do you think should be selling it? And so these are indirect ways to get these questions of trust, and channels, and even language about trust, and just asking this in a very concrete yet abstract way that helps people be imaginative and contribute their ways of thinking about the world, that can be a lot easier than just saying straight up, who do you trust? Who should, how should we design our thing? But more just getting people to contribute their ways of thinking to the solution.
Okay. Definitely taking notes with that. I might have to talk to you guys offline and get you to a class for our girls so they can really understand the true process of how to tell their stories. Now, how do you publicize and publish your work? What's the process with that? Because I know, like a couple of pieces that we've done, it's been really difficult, at least for me. And again, probably because I'm not the expert and I don't know who the true go-to people are. But how do you get your work published, or publicized so the community and the world can kind of see what you're doing? Is it through social media, or do you guys have like go-to people, like, I don't know, the newspapers? You know, we also struggle with that. It's like, yeah, we put it on social media, but it's like, as you guys know, it only reaches your friends.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do you,
No, I
how
think
do you
that
go down your friend circle?
that's
Because your friends want to know anyway, but it's just like, not that they don't matter, but it's like, you guys already know about us. What about really pushing it out there on a more global level?
Yeah, I think that is like such a difficult thing. And so you already mentioned like social media, and I have talked about how important that is, and I started a startup about that. But my business, when we were trying to talk about ourselves and get that, something that was very difficult is we really hounded journalists. We really followed them a lot. So we sort of like made a list of who are the people that we read and who are the people that we thought were important journalists and important outlets. And we would follow them on Twitter, and we would try to comment on their work and try to directly message them. We would try to DM them. And we would also ask, well, so this is something that's a little bit unique to a business, but this could also, be true at a university, any place where you have, supervisors or advisors who know more people than you. We would ask our advisors and investors what journalists they had been talking to recently and get them to introduce us to journalists. And then we would just we were very annoying. I suppose it sounds, when we were doing it, it felt like too much, and it was really hard for me because it really like pulled me out of my skin. But we were just constantly hounding these journalists to get them to talk to us. And then that is how we ended up getting, a handful of pieces written about us in like tech publications. And the other ways that I have done it that are like a little bit more low key is kind of keeping my ears open for somebody who knows someone who is an editor of a periodical, like any kind of thing. So a magazine that I would have gotten published in, or a blog that I would have been reblogged in, that I'm trying to follow those people and make friends with them, at a distance, on Twitter, on Instagram. And then occasionally what will happen is that someone will say, we're looking for something interesting about this in a smaller publication. And then I've like published, like STEM specific computer science, electrical engineering publications. And once I had that smaller place that I published, then sometimes the article was taken up by a larger publication, or it was read by a journalist or an editor at a larger publication. And that's when I would have gotten more interest in like an interview or a podcast. And so far, like my own experience of trying to get published is just relentless.
Okay.
But it also is like kind of a lottery. So the more that you put yourself out there, the more you blog, the more that you're tweeting, the more that you're making like Instagram stories, the more chances you have to do this, and the more content that you have to share. And the thing that I found in a lot of journalists is they were really interested if you had a lot of content to share. So anyway, in my experience, it has like not been easy. It's all about making a ton of stuff and talking to a ton of people.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, I think the piece about having the content to share in ways is about being generous to start. What can we offer that is worth someone spending the time to read something? I think that guides a lot of what we try to publish on our blog, on our website, in terms of learnings from our projects. It's is there a takeaway for the person who we are asking to spend time on our website? And so, for example, in this past year, with everyone working virtually and the challenges of that, we took the time to put together a little, article about some just remote working principles, how to make your remote communications better. How do you make your interactions with people better? And it's great if people want to share that, and also share that it's from OpenBox. At the same time, it's hopefully valuable for their lives too, because we're all navigating this together. So I don't know that we're global or having a global audience, but it's just one step at a time, providing something that's going to be meaningful, beneficial, add value to someone's life.
Yeah, and I, like we just said, we're teaching people how to communicate, particularly during this pandemic. I think I was one of the late understanders of even email communication where my caps lock used to get stuck, and I would send people emails, and they were like, "Why are you yelling?" But little nuances like that, I'm like, no, the caps lock was just stuck.
Or now ending your chat messages with a period. That's very serious. If you get that period, someone thinks they're yelling at you again.
I learned something new. Okay, so no punctuation in chat. So just a huge run-on sentence.
Are so tricky. I was just saying that I had to learn emoji etiquette, and professionally, totally unemotional and really cold. Not the world that I learned in school. You have to do that so much.
Oh, trust me, I use happy faces and everything, so just things aren't misconstrued. Because you try to, this world of instantaneous feedback and people expecting things instantly, because we're in this whole email internet era that sometimes we forget, and we're so busy typing, trying to get our point across, that some things are just totally lost. And I think even with storytelling, one thing that I did learn that I didn't think anything of with storytelling is transitioning. I didn't realize how important that was. And someone said one day that we put something together, and we were like, oh, we felt kind of dizzy. And I'm like, how so? They're like, because there was no transition. It's like you were here 1 minute and you were here the next. I'm like, oh, okay, sound fluid to me. But recognizing your audience when you're trying to communicate something, particularly something that's so passionate, we're all passionate about our work, and you just go on and on and on and not realize you've covered 5 topics in 3 minutes, and people are kind of dizzy. So just learning how to do that. But we are at the end. I see we have our 1 minute warning. So just quickly, you guys just want to sum up any advice for our listeners if they want to get into storytelling. I'll start with you, Amy. Any quick advice?
I think I'll just repeat the point I made earlier, which is just really think about, the fact that everything is a story. Things are facts, are stories. And so who's actually telling it, and what does it mean? And stories can be unintentional. And so the words that get chosen sometimes tell their own stories that might be deliberate or not deliberate, confusing, and then it starts its own snowball effect of what other story that gets translated into. So just keeping that in mind, I think, is really helpful.
Right, great, thank you. And Jean-Pierre? I love your name, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you. Yeah. And I really love a point that you made earlier, Amy, about being generous with your content. I think that the most important thing in my career and in any STEM career these days, I think, is making lots of content and being generous with who you're sharing your work with, and really putting out as much as you can. That's really how you move forward. Yeah. And anyway, thank you so much for talking, Dr. Winrow. This was great.
Thank you. You guys will be hearing from me. I'm serious about that. I really need some feedback and some help with these girls.
Yeah.
Please reach out. Let's talk more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for sticking with us about the technical difficulties. As mentioned earlier by our Master of Ceremony, we wanted this to feel like a real experience so that we experience as well what other people in other parts of the world who have connectivity issues experience on a daily basis, and try to adapt ourselves and our way of thinking, our mindsets, to take into account that technology, in order to be an enabler, needs to be accessible by everyone in a manner that is consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals and in achievement of a vision for equality of access. So thank you so much.